All right, so this is the last frontier. This is the last step. I hope you still have some coffee in your cup. So as you saw in the first video, we have a way of connecting the Revizto issues with the rooms in the model. And obviously this is going to really help get a sense of understanding. We just don't want to always be looking at text. Sometimes we need to understand where the issue is. So for this, we're actually going to need to do a connection of our table. So far, our table of Revizto has been kind of just floating around, and this is a file where obviously it's already working. And so what we're doing with the data model, this is all of our tables talking to each other. And what we're doing is we're going to be connecting. The list of all the elements is in the middle, so that includes chairs, doors, walls, things like rooms, and even materials as well. But just think of this as the list of everything. And that's what we want to filter, right? Because when we're looking in 3D, it's connecting to that list of everything. And there's two other tables that we could have gone through. What we're going to connect to is the element room. And there's quite an important difference between the element room and the instance room. So the element room is going to be the block itself, the room volume, if we will. When you talk about instance room, that is what is in the room. So let's look at two reports real quick that show us the difference between instance and element room. Obviously, they're both very useful for a different reason. So instance room, we have the room name. And then when I click on the room name, I see what is in that room and so forth. So this is useful, but this is not what we want right now. The element room is going to show us that geometry of the room. So this is much closer to what we're looking for. We're just going to do a couple modification in our viewer to attain that. So let's duplicate this. We'll play around with the 3D view right away so that we can achieve what we want. So first thing, we'll select the 3D viewer here and go into the formatting. And we'll say, well, don't ghost the context. I still want context, but please don't ghost it. Now, here's a problem, right? Well, this is a bit hard to see. So there's a new function in the 3D viewer called section box. So we're going to turn that on. And notice too how I can have an offset. Right now it's at -2. If I put it to -4, for example, we're digging more into the thing. And I'm just going to take off the outline because this is good enough. And maybe I'm going to put this back to -2, or yeah, let's say maybe -3 will be good enough. Let's just go click around. Actually, let's bring it back to -4. We'll be a bit more aggressive with this. And of course, you can modify the section after. But this is going to do a nice quick and dirty of giving us the context of the room that we're clicking in just by simply, using the element room table and using the section tool inside of our 3D viewer. Okay, so this file is already set up. Let's look at our mission and how we're going to get there. So we have our Revizto issues, and our Revizto issues have a room name inside of it. And we want to connect with the element room table, which also has the room name. Now, the room name is going to be written a little bit differently. So let's go back to our other report where this is not done properly yet. So we're going to look at our element room. And let's go look at the room name. So by default, Revit gives us the room name, not even how we see it in the software. It gives us the room name followed by the room number, whereas in the software, it would just say stairs instead of stair S1. So that's a bit annoying, but we can deal with it. And notice too how we also have the name. So this is a new column that Vim has created when you don't want to have the room name in there. But for now, we're going to be wanting to marry this column of the room name and the room number to the table of Revizto issue. And let's go look at that table because there's going to be a couple of problems in there. Okay, so see here, this is the Revizto issue table. And we're seeing that often the room number is between brackets. So it's not going to be a harmonious marriage if we try to have names that are not exactly the same. So there's a bit of data that needs to be cleaned in here so that they can actually talk to each other. Now, the other thing we notice is that sometimes the room name is not there. At the end of this video, I'll talk about the possible improvement in the data from Revizto so that we can have a more harmonious connection. And there's a couple missing elements, but that'll be for the final thoughts. So let's start to think about how we're going to fix this. Whenever we want to do a modification, we need to go into what's called Power Query. We did that in video number 1. It's also known as just the transform data button. But if you go online, it's not written anywhere, but this is called Power Query or transform data. So you'll hear me use both terms interchangeably. Now, if you remember, we're going to make this smaller, and just go right into our Revizto table here. And we can scroll in here until we find our room. And let's think of how we're going to fix this. So we see the list of changes that we've done before. I'm just going to go in a kind of stupid manner. I could probably just add a new custom column and enter some code in there. I'm just going to do it in a very naive way. So first thing I'm going to do is right click on the room and say duplicate column. Now, I don't want this to be called room-copy, so I'm just going to go in the code here and say room connection. And notice how it doesn't create a new step, it just fixes the data right away. Now, the next thing I'll do is I'll do a transform and I will replace the value. So I'm going to get rid of those brackets. So first thing, I want to replace the front bracket with nothing. Okay, we got rid of the front bracket. Let's get rid of the second bracket. So end bracket with nothing. Here we go. We got rid of the brackets. Now I'm going to go home and say close and apply, and we can see what this is going to give us in the data. So on the left side here, right now I'm in the kind of pure data view. I'm going to go back to the report view. Actually, no, I'm going to go back to the model view where I can take this table. And when you create a new table like the Revizto issue, it's usually going to be on the far right at the top. So if you're kind of hunting for your table, just look on the right side. And if you're really not sure, you can also click it in here, right? So if I'm lost and I click Revizto issue, well, it's kind of hidden down there, but at least it put it on the screen. So let's try to connect to our element room table. We're going to grab our, what do we call it? Room connection to element name. So everything is an element. And in this case, the room element name is the name of the room with the room number at the end, as we saw earlier. So element name to room connection. We're going to drag that. Now it's talking about this connection. We want to make it both ways and click save. Okay, let's go test it. Okay, so we have some success, but notice how not everything connects. So Cafe Kitchen may not have had a room that there maybe is a misspelling, whereas Cafe Kitchen 102, that one works. So some of them work, but some of them don't. And also if I select the level, it just doesn't work because it's a mix and match of some of them work and some of them don't. So once again, we'll talk about how to fix that in the long term at the end of this video. But for now, we want to we can either live like this where we have this semi-working thing, or we can bring it a step further where we kind of start determining, well, is there a connection? And if not, get rid of it, right? So how are we going to do that? Let's go back into Power Query into a transform data. And we're going to do, I don't know how to call it. I call it a kiss. It's basically two tables talking to each other real quick and saying, hey, do I have an equivalent here? If so, give me a number. Otherwise, give me a value that's null, and then I'll know if there's a connection between us or not. So let's go do that little micro connection. And this is a really good thing to know, how to merge tables. So we're going to go in here in the home tab of our Power Query, merge query. and we're going to connect this with the element room table. And it's a lot more visual than earlier, right? So we're going to go at the end, room connection to room element name. And it's actually going to give us some data. It says 132 out of the 264 do have a match. So we have roughly half of the data matching and half of it not having a room name or not having a valid room name. So we'll click OK. And now at the far right, once this little thinking is done, we're going to have this new column. And notice how there's this weird little icon here. We're going to click on those arrows and we're just going to say, give me a key. You know, that's just going to be a number. If it exists, it's going to give me a number. If there's no connection, it'll say null. Now, I think I'm just going to do this. I'm not even sure if you need to do this, but what I'm going to do is say, transform, this column is selected, transform, replace value, and I'm going to say replace null with -1. And then I'm going to go back home and close and apply. So now I know that whenever this new key is, and I should have given it a better name, but whenever this new key is -1, there's not going to be a proper connection in there. Okay, so just real quick, I'm going to rename that last column I created just so it's a bit more clear. Element room key doesn't mean much. So what I can do here is double click in there. I'll call it room connection key. At least it'll sort alphabetically kind of close. All right, so this is the last step. Basically, what we're going to do is in our filter pane, if you don't see your filter, you can turn it on here in your view setting. But basically, what we want is to bring our room connection key in here. And notice it's going to drag it in whatever. And we want to say is not -1. And now we got rid of half of our issues, the ones that weren't connected to rooms. But what that means is that whatever we select is going to have an effect on the model because there actually is a connection to the model. So now we've got the data talking to each other. And if we update the model, it's quite simple. We just need to go into Vim Enterprise or onto Vim Cloud. In this case, we would just click here, run, and it would take another 8 minutes to update the model if there were modifications to it. So now we have this two-way connection. All right, thanks for sticking so far with me. We've gone through a lot of stuff today. And I just want to talk about, well, we saw how the room connection, first off, it seems to be entered manually. The way that it's bracketed or not in Revizto is kind of inconsistent. I'm not a Revizto expert. I actually just only look at the data coming from Revizto, so I'm not sure. I have a feeling it's a hand input because of those inconsistency. And so I've already talked to the Revizto support team, and there are some things in the future that are going to help this connection with the model. There's going to be two other ways of connecting with the data, right? It can be a room name, but more specifically, it can be an XYZ location, and we can support an XYZ location. That's a lot more universal. The other way of doing it is if we have the element ID. So for example, if this column is problematic or this floor is problematic, and we say, hey, you know, this floor ID, whether it's the Revit ID or whether it's GUID, if this floor ID is where the problem is stored, then we can connect to it. So really, we can connect with the room, we can connect with the ID of the element, or we can connect with an XYZ point. So this data is going to be coming this year from Revizto, and we look forward to updating our workflow so that we have closer to 100% connection to the data that's coming from Revizto, and we don't have to rely on hand input of room names. And then if there's a slight misspelling, it's just not going to have that full connection. So I hope this was a useful video for you. We went through a lot today, so let me know if you have any questions, and we're going to be looking at other integrations in the very near future. Have a great day. Cheers.